Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Jeremy checking in for our Wednesday devotion. This is recorded on a Tuesday, but will be available for viewing on Wednesday night, January the 25th. I hope that you are doing well wherever you are. It's been a busy couple of weeks at the church. We've had lots of great energy and momentum with different meetings and had a chance to meet with our standing committees this past Sunday, and I'm really excited about the work that they're doing and their heart for serving the church. We had a really fun time at Sabor Latino last Thursday, getting a chance to get together and just enjoy a meal. And so it is good to be together. And so we're grateful for that. We'll have some things coming up soon. On February 4th and 11th are the Saturdays where we will be hosting Upward Basketball. And so if you have not signed up to help yet, I know that there are still many needs. If you would check with Bill Kahn, he would be glad to set you up for that with how you can serve. If you can make it one Saturday, if you make it both Saturdays, if you can just make it for part of one Saturday, they'll take any help that you can get. We'll have lots of folks in the community coming into our building, and we want to be gracious hosts for that. Today, for our weekly devotion, I'm going to stay with the text that was assigned for the daily reading. This comes out of Matthew chapter 5, and I'll talk a little bit about the broader context of what we're seeing in Matthew chapter 5, because if you've been reading for the past couple of days, there may be some passages you're like, okay, that's fine, I kind of knew this, or maybe that's not as relevant to me. And so we want to look at a theme about why this is here and maybe what Jesus is trying to show us. So in Matthew 5, we had seen the Beatitudes and the story of salt and light, which I talked about Sunday in the sermon. But then we also skipped over a part where Jesus is telling them, he says, don't think that I came to get rid of the law, but to fulfill it. And so Jesus is not coming to say all the things in the past were wrong, but this is now the full completion of understanding how things are in light of me. And he goes on to bring up a lot of you have heard that it was said. Now, this is one of those things that I think that I always wonder, like, someday when I meet the Lord, be like, well, you've heard this, but this is really how it is. And you may have heard some people say this, but this is really how it is. And it's this time to say, like, we know that you've been trained and maybe you were adamant in your beliefs, but actually, let me show you a better way. This reminds me that there's humility in reading this scripture, because there are things that you all heard in churches, sometimes potentially by this pastor, and the Spirit may convict you and say, you've heard that said, but actually this is what it means to live in love. And so the headings that I see in my particular Bible, getting into before today's text in chapter 5 is, murder. And you shall not murder is what Scripture had said. You shall not murder. Anyone who murders will be subject to the kingdom. But Jesus says anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoa, that got complicated fast, right? Because we take, well, I don't murder. I've never killed anybody. But Jesus is pointing us to a higher standard. So if you are talking bad about people and you're wishing will upon them, then you are causing an offense before God. And so that kind of humbles us that is here. And adultery, you shall not commit adultery. But if anyone looks at a woman lustfully, has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Wow, again, that kind of ramped up, because you may say, well, I've never committed adultery, but then Jesus says, if you're not looking at your heart and realizing the way that you are thinking improperly, in the way that maybe you're demeaning or downgrading or what's the word? Commoditizing, maybe? You're making this woman something other than what she's intended to be in a full relationship, then you're missing out on the kingdom's vision. It's your heart that God is concerned about. He's concerned about our heart and the way that causes us to treat other people. In the same way, you'll see divorce. It says, you've heard that it was said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. So again, it kind of steps up to this different standard, because what you've heard is, here are the technical things that you need to do. And Jesus says, let's get away from the technicalities and let's look what it means to be in a higher standard. So then we get to today's text, which is Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 through 37, and it talks about oaths. It says, again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear on an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything that comes beyond this comes from the evil one. Now, this feels like a pretty strict thing, right? We read Jesus and you're like, wow, Jesus, full of grace and full of truth, but that feels a little strong. You know, I don't know the last vow, not last vows, I remember my vows. The last oath that I needed to take, I've never been before the judge. I've never been in a situation where, wasn't sworn into office for political things. And so I don't know when I've had that in my life. But there are promises that we make all the time. And I remember growing up, we'd say, oh, do you swear? Do you pinky promise, right? Do you remember that? The pinky promise? Or if you really wanted to trick somebody, you'd say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to give you whatever and it's going to be a good thing. And they'd be like, really? And you'd be like, fingers crossed. And it didn't really count because we thought that we were tricking everybody and gaming the system. But in here, we see you're supposed to not break your oath and fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. We have entered into this covenant with God. You will be my God. I will be your people. Through Jesus, it has been extended to us. And so the question becomes, how do we honor that oath and that commitment in the way that we live our lives? But when we swear on anything, we're swearing on things that are not ours. If you swear by heaven, that's God's throne. If you swear on earth, that's God's domain. If you swear by Jerusalem, it's the city of the great king. And then it says, you swear about things, but you're really not in control. It says you swear by your head, but you cannot even make one hair white or black, or in my case, I can't make that hair grow back in the way that I would like for it to grow. All that you need is simply yes or no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. Douglas Hare, in his commentary on Matthew, points out that later on in Matthew chapter 23, Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees and the temple leaders, and he's pointing out some of their problems. And my version, trying to shorten it a little bit, is that they were swearing, but it was like, we're swearing on not by the temple, but we're going to swear on the gold in the temple. Today we would say we're going to swear on the Bible, because swearing on the Bible really means something serious, right? It means something different. And when we do that, we are trying to say, okay, look at how seriously we are taking our commitment. But the thing is that if we are pursuing a higher way of living, we should be of such high character that when we say we're going to do something, our yes means yes and our no means no. That if we say we're not going to go somewhere, that we don't do it. That people would be able to trust us and know that we have their best interests at heart, because we are going to honor the commitments that we've made before God and the commitments that we've made to each other. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I feel like the stronger somebody is trying to prove their truthfulness by swearing on, I've heard it said, swear on my mother's grave. I swear to God. People say that a lot. I'm like, I don't know. The more that you're pushing, the more I'm having a hard time buying it. What does it say about our character and the way that we carry ourselves? Later on, getting ahead of some other things that you'll be reading, you've heard that it was said an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. We want to say, I don't know, Jesus, this feels really hard. And guess what? It is hard, but it is what we are called to do. Sometimes when we try to be legalistic like those in Matthew 23, we're looking at Scripture as being the rule book. What's the technicality and how can I get away with things? And so and when it comes to oaths, you'd say, well, I swore on up into this whatever thing that was really important, and so it must mean that it is true. But it's just simply not how it is called to be. We are grateful that God has blessed us. We are grateful that God has allowed us to be a part of that story. But if that is the case, then it means that we are going to continue to work to honor God with our lives. If you look in the Message, and I don't have it in front of me, but the Message translation, Eugene Peterson words it in a way to say, like, when you are just using God's name for your own religious piety, then you're using it for the wrong purposes. When you are doing things simply so that people think that you are holier than you are, then you're using God's name for the wrong purposes. He says, if you say things all the time like, well, I'll pray about it. Somebody feeling convicted right now? You ever told somebody, I'll pray about it? What that really meant was, no, probably not, but I don't want to hurt your feelings right now. When we are not honoring what we say we're going to do, people have reasons to question whether or not the gospel is what it is. And so today's kind of a short devotion, but I would caution us to think how we are using God's name and how we enter into these relationships, how we figure out how God is calling us, and how we use God's name. We are keepers of the kingdom, but it is not ours. We cannot promise tomorrow. We cannot promise what lies ahead. And so we say yes, and it means that as much as we are able, Lord willing, as long as we are possible, we will do the things that we say that we're going to do. With all that said, I hope that you have a great week. I look forward to seeing you if Sunday, if not before then. And we just so grateful to be here and to be here with you all. Have a great week.